Started. You guys know what question I'm about to ask. If you don't, you're not paying attention week after week. How have you seen God working in your life? How have you seen the blessings from God in your life this week?
I had food to eat.
Yes, we had food to eat. Absolutely. And in view of what's going on in Zimbabwe right now with the famine, that should be on our radar screen of just how blessed we are, this thing that we take for granted. I mean, we all have refrigerators with food ready to go. And we're abundantly blessed in that way. So the rain, yes. Oh my goodness. I was like, even though it's a few sprinkles and slow, it's like, this is wonderful. So, well, it kind of trickled throughout the day for Derby. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, my blessing was I've been really obsessing about this watering thing because
Oh.
so many flowers and stuff. And just praying for rain, I sound
Yeah.
Vedic American or something. But finally I decided that I needed to remember, give it to God, let it be His will. And so I had this really wonderful prayer. And as soon as I finished, it started raining.
Ah.
I mean, it was like that. And I just sit there and Lord,
Yeah, that's great.
even though it was 5 minutes, at least it was a calling card. So I heard you.
Right. So you prayed for the flowers to thrive, to not die, for rain, and it starts raining. So if you could, please do that again,
Yes.
because we need as much rain as possible. Morning. Good seeing you, man. Anybody else on how you saw God acting in your life this week?
Successfully moved down the indoor dorm and out throughout the fall.
Okay, so Emma's in her dorm now. Remind me where she's going. Is it Missouri?
It's southeast.
Okay. I tell you, that drive home is hard.
Wasn't too bad.
Wasn't too
I
bad?
feel like there's another camp that we dropped around.
Okay. All right. Just an extended camp. Yep. It got real dusty in our car on the way home. I don't know what was going on with our vents or something, but when we dropped Braden off, I think now we're gonna be okay this go around. I think now that he's gonna be a sophomore. Well, congrats on getting her there. I hope she has a great semester. Yes, sir.
Yeah, very safe journey in Kentucky back.
I'm thankful. Yeah.
Family and friends that we haven't seen in a long time. Probably won't see some of them again.
Wow.
One of the situations, but I want to thank everybody for the cards and their prayers and their thoughts while we were gone.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful that you guys had a safe journey, and sorry for your loss of your brother. So, yes, sir.
My daughter made it back to California this week
Well, good.
to live here.
Oh, to live here.
with her
Okay.
family.
Fantastic.
And we come to church in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Long.
Well, fantastic. Looking forward to seeing her and meeting her. Anybody else before we get started? Okay. Every time you drive, you're blessed to get home in one piece. I tell you, it's getting a little spooky out there with all the distracted drivers. Like, we almost got hit yesterday by somebody that was just decided that they paid taxes so they could drive in every lane, and almost came into ours. So, yeah, well, all right. You feel better now, yeah. But yeah, with all the cell phones drive me nuts because everybody's looking down. I was like, your feet aren't that interesting. I know you're not looking at your feet. You're looking at your cell phone. So, no, sir. Okay. Yeah. Anyways. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. What comes to your mind when you think about the trial of Jesus? The suffering of the cross. Unfair. Yeah. 100% unfair. What are the indications that it was a sham trial, that it was unfair? In the night. Pilate washed his hands. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, they kind of threatened his political power because they knew the struggle between he and a higher up. But yeah, he was like, I find no reason for this. And
Man, he never been
When they did that,
no,
though, they offered,
Barabbas or
it's like, this guy's a really bad guy, or this guy's a good guy.
right.
You guys make a decision, and they chose Barabbas.
Right. Yeah, he was doing his best, it seems, to get Jesus out of that really tight scenario.
Losing faith, he was trying to let
Yeah.
it go.
Yeah. And of course, God's will was so that he could be the sacrifice, not only for us, but for Pontius Pilate and for all the people screaming for his death. He was here to be our rescuer. But yeah, the if you remember, it's been a long time since the sermon. But the thing about Barabbas, this insurrectionist, this murderer, hey, we can release this guy that you probably don't want to be your next door neighbor, or we can let go this guy that really I don't find a charge against. And the ironic thing is, he doesn't know, but he's saying, hey, we can let the Son of God go, or we can let Barabbas go. And Barabbas, bar Abba, is son of the Father. And so you can let the Son of God go or the Son of the Father. And they let the Son of the Father go, Barabbas. And it's like we're all created by God. We're children of our Father. And because Jesus went to the cross for us, we have been set free from the punishment we deserve. So,
Michael?
yes,
I
sir.
don't want to drag here too much. But you mentioned Barabbas was an insurrectionist. What were the Jews trying to do at the time? They were trying to throw the
Romans.
out of Palestine. So he was a criminal, but maybe he was a criminal that was doing things that the people wanted. I don't know.
Well, yeah, if they're trying to get rid of Roman power, yeah, the people would not mind that
He
happening.
may have been just a zealot. So
Gotcha.
maybe he gets a bad rap sometimes. Maybe he doesn't.
Fair enough.
He was unfortunately picked over Christ, I guess. He was
Well, if Christ had been set free, then yeah, it was right. It was in God's will for him to take our place. But yeah, if Barabbas had, his actions would have brought more punishment on the people, and of course that would have been more than I'm guessing the Jews would have wanted. But yeah, they definitely craved the freedom through a Messiah. So, all right, well. The thing about the trial of Jesus is he got passed around so much. Who all did he get passed around to during that trial? The soldiers? Yeah, okay, so there was the arrest. He went to the, arrested by the soldiers, betrayed by his own. He was taken to the Jews late at night, and then he was taken to Pilate that morning, and then Pilate sent him to Herod. Herod sent him back. He was given over to the soldiers of the Praetorium. It was just back and forth, and so it was unfair. It was harsh. And what comes to mind when you think of this character, Pontius Pilate? We've talked a little bit about him already. What comes to mind? Bureaucrat. Okay. Politician. Right. And he had, not only the Jews calling for something, and he's got a higher up breathing down his neck, but he also had his wife saying, hey, I had a dream about this guy. And so he's probably got a ton of things circling around.
One
But
of the things a lot of people don't know, he had already been given instructions that you got to get these people under control.
no.
And I can't remember which historian it was to put that out, but it's not on the Bible. It's just that he had been instructed that the Jews are out of control. You got to keep this under control. You cannot lose control of the country. And what do we do here? The only way he can see to keep the peace is to let Jesus go to the cross.
Yeah. Give them what they want. Yeah.
throw him a bone because he wanted total power like this guy's talking about. I remember hearing about that. So he threw him a bone, what he considered a bone, and said, I'm going to wash my hands of this mess. This is not going to happen.
Now, did he do that for his wife, though?
Yeah.
Did he say, I'm washing my hands, I don't have nothing to do with it? Did he do that because of what his wife said?
I don't know. I don't know if he did that because of that or not.
Wife, look, that's right about that. And I just had to get it.
I thought there's some of
There are a lot of them doing later, but he became a Christian.
Really? Is that right? I have never heard that. So some say he became a Christian, and just for people viewing online, there's rumors that he may have become a Christian and died as a martyr in Switzerland. Man, I hope that's true. What a story of redemption.
I've always wanted.
Yeah. Man, I hope that's true. That's encouraging to hear. Wow. All right. Well, we need to jump into our text to read some background before we watch our video. I accidentally just hit the microphone with my hand, so I apologize to people listening online. John chapter 18. John 18. We'll start in verse 28. You know, it's intriguing to think about what the emotions of Christ were throughout this whole trial event, because we saw in the garden just the stress that he had and the honesty with God of, Lord, if there's another way, but your will be done. And then to be betrayed by his own, and then under one of the trials to have Peter come and deny him 3 times. And one of the gospel accounts actually records like Jesus turning and looking straight at Peter, so that eye contact, and just imagining the pain that Jesus felt there. And now in this trial, so verse 28, John 18, we'll begin in verse 28. Oh yeah.
I saw that eye contact and he realized that was the 3rd time.
It's like, it's like Peter never even thought of what Jesus had said before, it seems. Like he's in the heat of the moment trying to save his own skin, and then he realizes. So yeah, there would have been, I cannot imagine. Oh, it had to sink so much. So John 18, beginning of verse 28, says, Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, What charges are you bringing against this man? If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said, Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. But we have no right to execute anyone. And so there's this huge leap of, who is this guy? Oh, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him. Well, you guys handle it. Well, we can't kill him. It's like he doesn't even know what the charges are, and now they're saying, we want him dead. They object to verse 32 says, This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace. Now listen to the details here. They're at a palace. He comes out to talk to the people. Now he's going back inside the palace. That's going to relate to our video. He went inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea, Jesus asked, or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you've done? Jesus said, My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What is truth? That sounds like a statement said today. What is truth? Retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, No, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they slapped him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" Now that fear probably did stem from the dream that his wife had shared with him about. He said, "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus, but Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You have no power over me, or you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement. Pay attention to that detail, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So pretty vile what the Jews have said, what they've done. But you can see over and over, Pilate has tried and tried and tried. So the details that we saw in there, in the palace, in the stone pavement, the judge's seat, think about those things as we're about to begin our video here. And this thing keeps shutting off on me.
Extensive excavations took place on the western side of Jerusalem's Old City, and here a gate complex was uncovered.
So what this is it's a gate in the stone pavement, and my professor, Shimon Gibson, was on staff in the excavation that uncovered what we're going to be looking at here.
This material comes from the Mount Zion archaeological expedition that worked here in the 1970s.
Is this the place that in Aramaic the Bible calls Gabbatha, the stone pavement where Jesus was tried under Pontius Pilate?
You see that stone pavement?
This is the Old City of Jerusalem. From 1973 to 1978, the Old City's western wall was excavated from Jaffa Gate to the southwestern corner where the wall turns east. This excavation was directed by Israeli archaeologist Magen Broshi.
See how those masonry is white, and then right almost when you get to the arrow slot, it turns dark. The soil level before excavations went all the way up to just below that arrow slot. And my professor, Shimon Gibson, used to put his lunch in that arrow slot when they were doing this dig.
One of the many books that my professor, Dr. Shimon Gibson, wrote is The Final Days of Jesus, the Archaeological Evidence. And in it, he writes, "The excavations revealed a monumental gateway with the remains of a large courtyard.
These are walls on either side of the gate, original. You're coming into the gate, You have your steps here. You're walking up the steps. You have the wall, the Ottoman wall. Do you see this patch of preserved wall over here? That's Herodian with the bulges sticking out. That's where the wall line was. We know a gate went in right here because look, you put steps into a wall, you put steps into a gate, and the steps are preserved in this case because they're cut into the bedrock.
This discovered gate led into the palace complex of Herod the Great and is described by the AD 1st century historian Josephus, who wrote of Herod the Great, "He built himself a palace in the upper city." Josephus describes the 3 fortification towers Herod built to guard his palace to the north. The foundations of these towers are still visible today. especially the largest one, just inside Jaffa Gate. Josephus wrote that adjoining and on the inner side of these towers, which lay to the north of it, was the king's palace, baffling all description. Indeed, in extravagance and equipment, no building surpassed it. The foundation of Herod's palace building have been found through excavations. Josephus also wrote that Herod's palace was entirely walled about to the height of 30 cubits. Notice the fortification walls enclosing the palace building, a royal garden, and another building, the barracks that housed the soldiers. Mark 15:16 says, "The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers." In his book, Dr. Gibson writes, "Today, a consensus of opinion exists among scholars that Herod's palace on the west side of the city was the same as the praetorium, and that in its immediate vicinity, Jesus was tried and condemned to death." So in this case, the scholarly consensus is in agreement with the Bible. The Gospel of John also states clearly that for his trial, the Jewish leaders took Jesus to the palace of the Roman governor, meaning in AD 33, when the trial took place, Herod the Great was dead, and so now Herod's palace was the palace of the Roman governor, who was at this time Pontius Pilate. There is an extra biblical source that says the same.
So Philo, you know who Philo is? Philo was born in 25 BC, Jewish philosopher, and he gives a very important quote. He says this. He says, "Pilate was one of the emperor's lieutenants, having been appointed governor of Judea. He dedicated some gilt shields in the palace of Herod in the holy city." Okay, so this is a historical source contemporary with Pilate and Jesus, who is connecting Pilate to, where is Pilate's palace? It's the palace of Herod the Great.
So if you were to look at Jerusalem in AD 33 at the time of the trial, then there would be two building complexes that would dominate the city. One, the temple, and the other, the palace. The temple was the focal place for Jewish worship, and the palace was the seat of government, so that the ruler from Rome could rule over the city and all of Judea. So where would we expect, after Herod's death, where would we expect Pontius Pilate to be ruling from when he's in Jerusalem? Definitely the palace. Therefore, when the New Testament says Jesus went to the temple, it means here. Just as when it says Jesus was taken to the palace, it means here. So the question then is, where in this palace complex did the trial take place? So on the western side of the palace complex, we know there was a gate. One of the main reasons Herod the Great would have built this is as an escape route in case the city revolted against him. And there was only one gate that connected the palace complex to the outside of the city. The way that we know this is through archaeology, because that entire western side was excavated in the 70s and only one gate was found. In his book, Shimon describes what they found when excavating the gate area. Gibson writes, "The excavations revealed a monumental gateway with the remains of a large courtyard situated between two fortification walls. On the north side of the courtyard was a rocky outcrop, and on top of it was a small rectangular built platform with steps. Located at the ruins of this gate, a reconstruction of the gate from Dr. Gibson's book is shown on a sign, which we based our own reconstructions on. The monumental gateway consisted of an outer and inner gate. The remains of a large courtyard made from stone pavements was made of a lower and upper floor connected by stairs."
Why don't you see stone pavement here today? Well, because that's the problem with archaeology. Archaeology is also, it's self-destructive. And so when you find a floor, in this case a stone pavement floor, then what archaeologists tend to do is rip it up and look for coins underneath it, because that dates when that floor was put in. But there's still just a few of those stone pavements that are still in situ in their original position. You ready? Here they are. You see that stone pavement? Okay, so that stone pavement went out across here.
On the upper stone pavement was a small rectangular built platform with steps. In Greek, this is called a bema, which is translated judgment seat. From here, Herod, and then later Pontius Pilate, could address a crowd of people.
As you're coming up here, they found these steps. Oh my gosh. It's gone. Oh man. The bema stone is gone. Wow. There was a bema stone that they found that was right here. Maybe that's it. Yeah, that's it. So somebody pushed it over. Do you see how that rock is carved right there? That's it. It was sitting up here over the last 2 years. Somebody pushed it down. Looks like it broke off the side of it too. That's a crying shame, because that is part of the preservation of the bema.
So whenever something is found in archaeology, it needs to be interpreted. What is it? What does it mean? And the best tool to use for interpreting archaeology are ancient texts. And the ancient text that was used in this excavation to interpret these finds was the Gospel of John. In his book, Gibson writes, "These finds also fit very well the description in the Gospel of John regarding the place of the trial of Jesus." There's a lot of description in the Gospel of John that they're going in and out. Pilate's going in and out. He's bringing Jesus in and out. So there has to be a gate. And in the excavations, they found this gate complex. The place is called in the Gospel of John the stone pavement. And what did they find in the excavations? A stone pavement. Pilate sits down on a judgment seat, which they found through archaeology. They found the judgment seat.
But this is where Pontius Pilate would speak to the people, where he would sit on his judgment seat.
So this fitting between the Gospel of John and what was found in the excavations that he took part in is why Dr. Gibson interprets this place as being biblical Gabbatha. So if you want to learn more about how the Bible fits with the archaeology of Jesus, I recommend my book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence. I'm a very visual person, so it's a very visual book, and I'll leave a link in the description below where you can order that. So the reason that this site is not better known is that the director of these excavations back in the 70s, Magen Broshi, never published the excavations. Dr. Broshi has now passed away, and so my professor, Shimon Gibson, has inherited the responsibility of publishing these excavations. And as one of his students, I've worked for many years on the material that comes from this gate complex and other places. And I can tell you that it's still going to be a long time until this is published, because the amount of material coming from this excavation is overwhelming.
These are stone vessels also from that period of time. And boxes, and bags, and boxes, and it just goes on and on. All the way out here. So much work.
Yep. So before we go in and read the details about the trial, we need to understand something in general. When the Bible talks about the palace, it's talking about anywhere within that palace complex. The same is true for the temple. When we read that Jesus and the apostles went to the temple, it does not mean that they went into the temple building itself. And the same is true for the palace. When it says that Jesus was brought to the palace for his trial, it could mean anywhere within the whole palace complex. When you entered into that western gate, you were inside the palace. And when you exited that western gate, you were outside the palace.
Now come on up and we'll read the story because that's, of course, what brings it all to life.
The Gospel of John says, the Jewish leaders took Jesus to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. Now Josephus informs us that the palace complex was filled with brazen statues. And this only makes sense because the palace was the Roman stronghold of the city, and Roman places had the statues of their gods and their goddesses. And so this is why the Jews don't want to go in to anywhere inside the palace complex, or it would make them unclean. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Pilate then went back inside the palace to ask Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" They have a discussion, and then Pilate went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." He went back in the palace, where Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. So the question then is, where is the most likely place in the palace complex where the flogging of Jesus took place by the Roman soldiers? The barracks for housing the soldiers was located at the southern end of the palace complex near the western gate. Until recently, this area was covered by a massive pile of earth. To get the next shot, I stood on the wall facing west. This shows that the pile of earth has now been removed and is now a large parking lot. The western gate entered the palace here, and when the pile of earth was removed, an archaeological square was left behind from the salvage dig here. I was leading a group when I saw this for the first time.
What is this about?
Wow. I will explain when everybody gets here.
You haven't seen that?
No, I've never seen this.
Me neither.
This is, there was a gigantic mound of dirt, and the whole mound of dirt is gone. And so I jumped up on a bench and looked over and saw this. We are inside of Herod the Great's palace complex. And that is the floor of some building that was in that complex. Now I can tell by looking at I almost went to visit it down there. I can tell by looking at the tesserae, these little cubes, and this is the Roman period. We're looking at the time of Jesus right there. And we're looking at it in a place that we know Jesus went through this particular event where he was flogged by the Roman soldiers. So it makes sense. It's the most probable place where the flogging of Jesus took place would be inside the gate and near the barracks where the soldiers lived, since it was the soldiers that flogged him. And so I'm not saying that it took place right where we saw that mosaic floor, but somewhere in the vicinity of these barracks is the likely place where the flogging of Jesus took place. And so these mosaics are critically important. They connect to the event of Jesus being flogged by the Roman soldiers, and yet they're a parking lot today. I mean, as an archaeologist, that's pretty depressing. After the flogging, John's gospel continues. Once more, Pilate came out, and this time, Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" bringing the charge that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. Then Pilate goes back out, where he is told of Jesus that anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the stone pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. With all this going in and out, there has to be a gate. Why not the gate complex
that is found in the 1970s through archaeology, where they also uncovered a stone pavement and a judgment seat. John 19:16 says, finally Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. And then what happens next, as recorded in the Gospel of Luke, is what absolutely convinced me that this place was Gabbatha. Luke 23:26 says, as the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. So Luke says, as they led Jesus away, where were they leading Jesus away from? Gabbatha, from the stone pavement, place of the trial. And so then it says that Simon of Cyrene is coming in from the open country. Okay, there's only one gate for the palace complex that connected the palace to the open country, and that's this western gate. Surely there was an eastern gate, but that connected the palace to the city. Simon of Cyrene couldn't have been coming in from the country, approaching that eastern gate. The western gate, we know that there's only one. We know this from the archaeology because the entire western side of the palace complex was excavated and only one gate was found. And so this is the gate for the palace complex that would allow for Simon of Cyrene to come in from the open country and then be given the cross of Jesus to carry. Okay, so we have to deal with the problem of why people aren't brought to this gate and shown this place. They're taken to another place on the eastern side of the city, and they're shown the remains, archaeological remains of another gate over there. So in order to understand how this happened, we need to follow the history of Jerusalem. In AD 70, the city of Jerusalem was massively destroyed by the Romans, and this is when that western gate was also destroyed. It was sealed off under the rubble of the destroyed wall and fortifications that were near it. So it's sealed off. About 100 years later, the Roman Emperor Hadrian comes and rebuilds the city, calling it Aelia Capitolina. In Hadrian's city, he built an eastern gate. And it's the remains from this gate that is seen and that people are taken to today. And so now it's known with certainty that this gate that people are shown dates to the time of Hadrian. And so it is in the wrong place and it is from the wrong time. The gate that dates to the right time and is in the right place is the western gate, which of course remained sealed under the rubble and destruction of Jerusalem until it was finally discovered through excavations in the 1970s. Again, another amazing place that nobody comes to, and yet, of course, it's not about the Jews crucifying Jesus, and it's not about the Romans crucifying Jesus. It's about all of us who crucified Jesus. Right? Because we're all fallen short of the glory of God. We're all sinners in need of the forgiveness and the atonement of the blood of Jesus. He wasn't crucified against his will, against God's will. He surrendered himself to that kind of punishment, to take our punishment on himself so that we could receive what we don't deserve, and that is his grace. It's this match between the archaeology and the Gospel of John that really convinces me that this is Gabbatha, the place where Jesus was tried by Pilate. If you found value in this video, please like it. It helps it get out to other people so that they
Yes, sir. Oh, is that right? I had not known that his was like that. So I can't pretend to know all the answers or answer anything now. As always, archaeology can be incorrect, but it's pretty strong evidence that he presented there. So any comments before we close? Questions?
Shows how much destruction could have happened in Jerusalem.
Oh yeah.
after 70 AD.
Yep.
It was predicted by God.
Yeah, to have all of that, the Western Gate and that area, the temple destruction, all sorts of different things. Yes. Yep. Where was Golgotha? I do not know the answer to that. I do not know the answer.
One
Sorry.
of the things I've always been interested in is they keep saying, or they say it one time anyway, we don't have any law to put a man to death. So how many people were stoned to death or were wanted? Now this wasn't the Pharisees stoning the people, but it was the leaders of the community that stoned Stephen. They wanted to stone the lady who was caught.
In adultery, yeah.
You know, so they put people to death. I think it's just not legally. I don't know.
Right.
I was looking to see if the lady, if they said it was legal for them to do that, but I haven't done it yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a crucifixion they were seeking, which I guess it just shows the intense hatred they had for Christ, because there was no more, that I know of, an execution that's more painful and prolonged than a crucifixion. So, what? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, purple was a color of royalty. I don't know if they got it from. Yeah, where did they get the purple robe? I was not there that day. Yes. Oh, she's got an answer for us.
The purple is extremely costly because it came from a tiny little shellfish in the Mediterranean, and it takes hundreds of them to make enough dye.
Well, yeah. So where did they get it? I don't know. I'm guessing it would have been somewhere in the palace complex. So, yeah. So one thing before we have our closing prayer, I don't know if you remember the Glimpses series that we did several years ago, but when Abraham went to go sacrifice Isaac, it was on Mount Moriah. And Isaac asked, where's the sacrifice? And he said, God will provide. God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And went up there, of course, God stopped him from having to kill his own son. Mount Moriah is also where they say is where the temple is. And what's striking is the ram that they were able to sacrifice was caught in a thicket of thorns. And Jesus had a crown of thorns placed on his head. He was the sacrificial lamb in the same region being sacrificed. Abraham didn't have to sacrifice his son, but God did for our good. So it's very striking parallels on that. Yes, sir.
I did find that it is described in the Pharisees that took the woman to Jesus, and they said she was caught in the very act of adultery. And it says in verse 5 of John 8, now Moses in the law commanded us to be stoned.
Right.
So,
and what do you say? Yeah.
What putting to death?
Right. Right. And they were trying to trap Jesus, of course, in that moment. And I think Rome would have had a lot to say if they had carried out an execution in that moment. I think that was their point of trying to trap Jesus in that moment. Yes, ma'am. Well, you'll be the final comment because we do have to end.
Just a little rabbit trail. But if anyone noticed in the scene where they were showing all of the pottery and stuff, if you noticed along the wall, there were wooden boxes that were stacked up that they had things in. Those wooden boxes were tea boxes. They're still made today. Tea's still shipped in them today. And if you watch British TV, you sometimes will see one in a program. But those are the same boxes, well, not those identical, but the same style boxes that the Bostonians dumped the tea into.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, appreciate that. Well, guys, I will be gone next Sunday, and Brian is going to be our teacher next week. So come back next week. He's going to have a great class, and thank you for your time and comments.